remember when I lost my mind. There was something so blessed about the place. Even your emotion had an echo in so much space. When you're out there without a care, yeah, I was out of touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just too knew much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Probably.
Once again, knocking it out of the park with that one. His version of a CeeLo classic, Crazy. Thank you for that, Jazz. These are crazy times. We were having a ball just a week ago, and today we're a bit unsure about things. It's because, of course, we've announced the cabinet lineup. And as you can tell, I'm having a bit of an issue with my voice. That kind of happens after you've announced 800 award winners. Last time I did that at the Hero's Journey event, the Kanchil Awards. So congratulations to all you ad agency people out there. A big up to all of you. You make the campaigns pop. And speaking of popping campaigns, we have the results from the elections, which were of course spurred on by furious campaigning. And as a result, we have a government that's never existed before, a mix of very interesting characters. And now that blend has become more solidified as we have a cabinet lineup like never before. So we're gonna get into that, we're gonna talk about it, but I know you love your tech. So we've gone out and doubled down on tech. So today, on this very special live edition of Talk to Terrence, we're gonna have twice the tech dose. First up, we head to our king of gadgets, Johnson, as he takes us through what an EV charging station is all about. And then when we come back into the studio, we'll be talking to an owner and operator of a drone company. What's that all about? We're gonna find out. Don't go anywhere. Talk to Terrence. We'll be right back with me, my sexy voice, and Jazz. Don't go anywhere.
Does that make me crazy? Probably.
What is up? Welcome back to the show. Now, Alyssa Milano just recently announced that she's ditching her Tesla. She's going to get a Volkswagen. Both, of course, are EV or hybrid vehicles. Both, of course, require EV charging stations. Now, I don't know what all the Twitter beef around Elon Musk is about. Personally, I'm loving Twitter right now. I hope you are too. It's become more free, more open. But with the charging station for an EV, I am not sure what goes into making one because, of course, I'm not that much of a tech geek. But Johnson is, so he's gone out and done some research and he's pulled some plugs together so he can help you figure out what are the components that go into an EV charging station. Also, what are the safety features that you need to take note of. So on that note, let's bring up Johnson as he's gone out and done some due diligence on EV charging stations. Over to you, Johnson.
Alright, so I'm missing you guys back in the studio. Today is something special because I came over to this EV charging office because we are going to borrow some of their props to show you about this particular topic, right? So today in Talk to Terrence, we're going to talk about EV, which is electric vehicles, and also EV chargers. Okay, of course, EV chargers, we always mention it wrongly, commonly used in the public. Everyone say EV chargers, but EV chargers actually stand for EVSE. Okay, that's the more accurate one. EVSE stands for Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment. All right, so let's talk about EV cars first, right? Electric vehicles. So today in Malaysia, there's actually more than 50,000 electrical vehicles out there in the market, right? 50,000 is because there are actually 3 categories of these EVs, right? Category number 1, very common 10 years ago, okay, even slightly before that, we have already seen things like hybrid vehicles like Prius. There's also the Honda's one, right? Inside and all that. So these type of hybrid vehicles, you actually don't charge it externally. It has a very small battery that it charges itself whenever you brake, right? It's called regenerative, right? It charges itself, and then this little battery can do a few things. One, during traffic jam, when your engine is off, the battery is the one that runs all your aircon and things like that. It keeps you comfortable. At the same time, when you start moving, okay, the first maybe 5 kilometers per hour, it is actually using the electric motor to push your car before the engine, the petrol engine, comes into play. All right? Why these electric vehicles came in place was because we wanted to reduce the carbon emission, okay? Because when your car is in the traffic jam or in the traffic light or waiting at the junction, the engine is running just to power up your aircon and your audio system. It is not pushing the car. So which means, number 1, your fuel efficiency is not very good because every liter of it is not pushing your car additional kilometers, okay? And second, it's not environmentally friendly, right? Because then the car will start to, just burn fuel, and then you have carbon monoxide, you have carbon dioxide, and all the other stuff going into the environment, right? And not just for hybrid vehicles, yeah? Because these days, even motorcycles have this start-stop technology where at the traffic light, when you stop, the engine will shut off, and then you just need to restart and move whenever the lights turn green, right? So that's the first type of electric vehicles, which is the hybrid vehicle, or commonly called HEV, right? The second type is plug-in hybrid, PHEV. So plug-in hybrids are usually those cars that has both. You will have a ICE, which is internal combustion engine, okay, which runs on petrol. Usually there are also diesel versions, but very rare in Malaysia. And then it has slightly a bigger battery that powers the electric motors. And then the electric motor is the one that you can actually drive up to 80 kilometers per hour or even 140 kilometers per hour, depending on which type of plug-in hybrid cars. And you can go as far as 30 to even 90 kilometers in range purely on battery, okay? So plug-in hybrid vehicles, you can charge it with multiple ways. One is, of course, it has that regenerative recharging, just like the hybrid vehicles, where every time you slow down, you're going downhill, or when you apply on your brakes, the force that you use from the wheel is used to charge the battery, okay? And the beauty part of it is also it has a charging flap for you to plug in to charge your vehicle, which we are going to talk more about that later on, right? So that's plug-in hybrid, and usually plug-in hybrid, people love it is because of the sheer amount of power the car is producing, okay? Because plug-in hybrid usually comes with a quite powerful petrol engine, and then powered by the motor as well, right? You can use both of it together, and it can give you a lot of torque, which means your 0 to 100 numbers for vehicles like this is insane, all right? And then the third category, which is the BEV, battery electric vehicles, or sometimes people call it full EV vehicles. These are the one that is running fully on a battery, right? It doesn't have any petrol or diesel motor inside. It has either a single DC motor or sometimes dual DC motor to give you the extra power. And this type of cars solely runs on electricity, okay? And because electric motor are like so instantaneous, right? Instant power. So the 0 to 100 numbers for these type of electric vehicles are also insane, all right? So we have covered about electric vehicles. Now let's talk about charging the electric vehicles, right? So this only applies to plug-in hybrid and also the battery EV, all right? So you can plug in to charge, all right? So of course in the world, there's a lot of charging interfaces out there. If you Google it today, you will see things like Type 1 chargers, Type 2 chargers, CCS, CCS2, okay, there's Tesla specific chargers, there is CHAdeMO chargers, a lot of them, right? The good news is over in Malaysia, okay, we are very commonly using one type of charger, which is the Type 2 charger. Alright, and before I go deeper into the Type 2 chargers and stuff like that, I will give you a little bit of a background between the different type of chargers, or EVSE, right? The electric vehicle supply equipments, okay? So, because our electricity from the grid, it's AC, alternating current, alright? So there's a AC type of charger, which you can use for home, and then there's a DC type of charger, alright? The AC charger, very simple, from your house, it can be a single phase or a three phase, which means this type of EVSEs, okay, just like the one that you can see behind us, okay, or the type that is supplied with most of your cars. If you buy plug-in hybrid, you have this 3-pin plug, alright, and then here is the Type 2 interface where you plug into your car. This will easily just charge your car just from the 3-pin plug, okay. However, the speed of it is kind of slow because this type of chargers usually just push out around 2.4 kilowatts. Okay, this type of wall-mounted one can range anywhere from 7 kilowatts to 22 kilowatts, and this improves the charging time by a lot, right? Because usually, let's talk about plug-in hybrid. A plug-in hybrid car's battery is around 10 kilowatt hours kind of thing. So by using this, probably takes around 5 hours to charge, but using that, around 2 hours, right? And for big cars, like big BEVs, like the Tesla, 100 kilowatt hour battery, okay? If I'm going to just use this to charge, it's going to take around easily 3 days, right? But one of these, around 5 hours, right? So that's why a lot of EV car owners are getting this type of wall chargers, is for that purpose. And the other point as well, right? Because we are pulling so much power, okay? Just imagine what will happen to your 3-pin plug if you're like charging constantly at a high speed and things like that. Most probably the 3-pin plug is going to melt, right? So I was I am still a plug-in hybrid car owner, right? So since the first generation, I actually changed a few of these. It's because my 3-pin plug melted from the heat of it charging, right? So eventually I also changed to one of these wall chargers because it's really helping a lot, right? Yeah, so that's one of it. So and then all of this is still AC charging for home, right? And a lot of people is talking about, like, you know, BEVs and things like that, those battery EVs. If you want to quickly charge it up, this one is still taking so long, okay? That's where we have the DC chargers, okay? Usually you can find it in petrol stations or beside highways and things like that. So DC, just like its name, is direct current charging. And these are very fast charging. It's because batteries, as we know, just like your AA battery, your phone batteries and things like that, they are running on DC current, okay? So the DC chargers will directly charge DC to DC, that's why it's so fast. And DC chargers also are rated easily from 30 kilowatts all the way to 180 kilowatts. So that's why, like a Tesla, you can charge to full within just 40 minutes, okay? Comparing to this, 5 hours, right? However, at home, you don't need a DC charger, okay? One is almost quite impossible because DC chargers, you need to pull the power directly from TNB. So by installing one of these AC chargers, okay, although it's slightly slower, however, 5 hours, come on, you go home, you sleep, the next morning is already more than 8 hours, right? So that's why AC chargers for home users, no problem, can install one, right? So, I mean, I'm thankful that I'm here today because the shop owner actually let us shoot in here and can showcase some of the products. So these days, it's very easy for you to own one as well. If you want to look for any of these AC chargers, okay, and get one for your home, well, this company is ChargeSync. So yeah, just visit their website, right? www.chargesync.com, and you can self-serve to pick one up, whether you just want to just get the unit and install it yourself, or they even provide installation services. All right, so that's it from me, John Salam, the gadget guy. Back to you, Dr. Terrence. Terrence, see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jazz, for that. Welcome back to the show. Thank you for being with us on Dr. Terrence. Now, we're going to get into the cabinet shortly, but we're going to get into something more futuristic for now, which is, of course, taking over just about every sector today. Even in agriculture, you see drones. It's not just in transportation, not just in movie making, and it's not just a fun toy to have. It is something that's revolutionizing the way business is looked and perceived at, and a lot of traditionally more mechanical work can now be undertaken by these drones on scale. So yes, let's bring in the star of the show, a drone. Hey? Now, this is not a flying car. It may look like one for those of you that were at that Langkawi display, but here we go. That's what a drone looks like today. And joining me to help us explore the world of drones a little more, we have two individuals that know a lot more about the technology than I do. AMSYAR FAIZ, who's the Chief Business Officer with Ofotech Sdn Bhd. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Dr. SHIAN, CEO of ALPHASWIFT. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started with the history of drones. AMSYAR, why are people so fascinated by drones?
Well, drone technology is certainly not a new innovation, but it certainly has a lot of versatility that it can help, as you have previously mentioned. People, hobbyists, they use it to capture marathons, wedding events, but on the other flip side of it, industries, they use drone technology for more heavy-duty work, which is very disruptive and also can optimize efficiency, cut cost, eliminate risk, and much, much more as well.
So, Dr. Lee, I first discovered drones watching, of course, one of those Hollywood blockbusters where a drone was used in an unmanned airstrike. So that is like cutting-edge technology. The drone was fitted with some weapons of mass destruction, and it dropped a huge package on an enemy target. Is that where it all started for drones?
Kind of true, yes. When you mentioned the word drones in the US, right? I was studying in Purdue in the US. That time was about 2007. When you mention drone, they relate to warfare, like Barack Obama, drone strikes, right?
Right.
So the technology was developed to have an unmanned aircraft flying without the pilot's exposure to the dangerous areas. And as you said, to deliver payloads.
Weapons.
Yes, it's true. It's developed for that purpose.
So it started with that, and it has evolved and permeated into many different areas of our lives today. In fact, I think a lot of people don't know that even in agriculture, on scale, drones are being used to deliver friendlier payloads, fertilizers, and they can even record data about crops and how the crops are doing on a yield basis. So can you tell us how that evolution took place, Doctor, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, it all started, I think all advanced technology usually will be used in the military sector, and then after that they will be used in the civilian sector. Yeah. So for example, drones like this, they are called multicopters. They are very easily built. You can build them very easily nowadays because of the microcontrollers. They are getting more and more powerful and also cheaper. And the firmware that runs inside it is getting more and more powerful as well. More and more people are starting to understand how to build the firmware. So as that goes on, we realize that you can attach many different payloads. For example, like you said, the fertilizers, yeah? And sensors, especially sensors. Drones are just massive data collectors. You can collect so much data, not only visually. Most of the time we see that people are using it to collect visual data. You can use it to collect also other data, for example, air quality, radar, for the electronic signals, and many more.
Right.
If I may add on that.
So yeah, I'm sure I was gonna cut you.
Basically, military application was where drones was primarily utilized. However, in the commercial application, RC motor, radio controlled, is not something new. But fast forward, people started putting GPS, people started putting cameras, and then wow, suddenly it's a totally new value proposition. As Dr. Lee mentioned, multi-sensors. RGB camera is not just one of them. It takes footages, images, but if you put multispectral images, you put hyperspectral, voila, you can see things that are technically invisible to our naked eye. Thermal sensors, infrared, night vision, and you can talk about Iron Man already.
Wow.
Going forward, yeah.
So we're getting there, but that in which also brings us to the subject of privacy concerns when it comes to a drone. Because the drone, as you mentioned, is mad on data. It can collect data from wide spectrums of areas and in wide variety of data as well. Not just images, but infrared data, a whole host of data can be collected on the drone depending on what you put on it. So where do these privacy concerns rank in terms of advancing drone technology? AMSYAR.
Well, in terms of privacy, I don't think it is limited to drone technology itself. It's a camera. Pretty much anyone can use a smartphone, a CCTV to actually do things that are unethical, illegal, so to speak. But in terms of drone technology, there are other issues as well in terms of privacy, security. It's a flying airborne object. If it drops down, you need only one mistake for a disaster to actually occur. So that's one issue that drone technology currently has to be further looked into. Yeah.
Are there any laws being put in place to curb drone usage?
Of course. We have been working very closely with CAM, Civil Aviation Authority of Malaysia, and we have to follow the regulations very, very closely because these are regarded as aircraft.
Wow, this is an aircraft.
Yes.
So a drone pilot, I mean, I would call him a pilot, but
They
drone
are
operator, they're
pilots.
considered pilots?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
You
wow.
need to get license.
Yeah.
You can get license nowadays. You can go to a training organization, pass your exams, and then they'll give you a card.
Okay.
Then you're a drone pilot.
So what can you do as a drone pilot as opposed to a hobbyist or an enthusiast? What's the difference?
Very much. So with a drone pilot license, you're certified to do commercial work. So now you have you have understood the limitations, and also you know what is not appropriate when you're using this aircraft. So for commercial purposes, you need a drone pilot license, and then you need the drone pilot license to be able to purchase drone insurance.
Drone insurance.
Yes, many things come in.
Even heavy duty. Heavy duty work for oil and gas that requires further certification, licenses, which are made available only few international bodies worldwide. That being said, I believe hobbyists, they will be able to operate a standard Mavic or Phantom. But when it comes to the more heavy-duty drones, M300, that would be more difficult. That's where one will require more certification.
So that's why for commercial purposes, if you're using it for business,
you can drive you can go to get a license, drive a MyV, but you need license to drive a truck. It's a different
exactly. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
In order to operate, yeah.
I like a C70 and a Harley, completely different. EX5 and a Harley, completely different.
Perfect description, yeah.
So yeah, there you go. But when it comes to the flip side of that, in terms of law enforcement, I think drones are very practical. I've seen, I don't know if this is hypothetical, but it was a use case in New York for the NYPD where the drones were used very effectively. But I'm not sure if large-scale deployment is still something to future tech. Your opinion, Doctor?
It's happening now. So we have the capability to control multiple units. So you have the ratio will be 1 to 20. That is allowed. The regulators, I believe in the US, they allow for one operator to control up to 20 units of aircraft, unmanned aircraft. So it is allowed and it is doable, yes.
So it's surveillance drones, there are, law enforcement drones which actually help apprehend the perpetrators. So there are different types of drones that are used in any capacity by law enforcement. Where do you think technology like that ranks in Malaysia in terms of our adoption? I mean, I've seen the drones in the fields for agriculture, but what about the other applications, AMSYAR?
For military?
For Malaysia, yeah.
Oh, for Malaysia in general, the commercial drones, quite standard. I believe for the military, if I may add on, I will pass that the commercial side to Dr. Lee. For military, there will be tactical, strategic, as well as small type of drones. So strategic, such as mail and hail, medium altitude, long endurance, or high altitude, long endurance, which is currently not the focus of the Malaysian government. They are more operating on the small drones, whereby they're using for riot control, for surveillance, for police force, so on and so forth. About the tactical, strategic weapons payload, I believe that would be subject to MINDEF's discussion. So, to Dr. Lee, for the commercial side.
I totally hope we don't have to drop any payloads.
Most of the time, the unmanned aircraft are being used for ISTAR missions,
Right.
which is for surveillance and target acquisition. So you can mount night vision cameras, infrared cameras to look at that specific area and try to locate where are your targets. So most of the time it's being used like that.
Correct. For military, in terms of commercial, taking pictures and spraying pesticides, fertilizer. I'm sorry, just pesticide. In terms of transportation, that would be in China. EHang is one of the notable drone companies that operate flying cars, so to speak. But other than that, cargo, probably to lift cargo. That's one area where Malaysia is probably heading in the near future. But of course, not to derail the topic, a drone itself is just the flying object. I believe data, Mr. Lee would agree, the data, what you can use after the data, after you acquire it, you process, you can analyze, and you can store it in a single database. That's where a lot of wonders will actually happen. You can gain insights, make big data analytics, add artificial intelligence. So that's something that really is more, carries more weight moving forward. Yeah.
You sound excited about that.
Oh, I'm really excited.
So talk to us about the future. What do you see when it comes to drones applied in the way that you just described?
It's just like when you learn in school, like you're surprised that when you graduate and you are in the real world, you see that the technology that you learn theoretically are only being applied currently. So that really is a big excitement. Mr. Johnson previously, I believe, he's talking about battery technology. Now there is LiPo, solid-state batteries. There is even graphene. So that's also another form of innovation that we are looking into. Very interesting.
All right, so for the commercial side of things, I understand there are a lot of students with very exciting projects right now in the final year, all around drones. I'm sure that funding is something of the issue because, as you mentioned, drone technology is still, although not already licensed, there are, of course, some pitfalls. So in terms of the future of drones, what would you like to see from the new government? Because they're just in power, we just have the cabinet list and everything. What kinds of applications would you like to have on the table from the new government to advance drone tech in Malaysia?
Cargo delivery. So my company is now pushing forward for the cargo delivery sector.
So will it be like door to door?
Yeah, not really door to door, but from one place to the other. So we've been discussing a lot about data and how to handle data and privacy and all that, right? So drones are good for two things. It is good for collecting and also dispersing data. It's also good at collecting and also dispersing physical things, right? So you have cargo delivery drones. Agriculture, the one that disperse the fertilizers, those are for physical things. So cameras and sensors, those are for data. So they will transfer data, they will transfer things.
Wow,
Yeah.
I don't know how to imagine that. Air traffic is going to be madness.
That's why we are working very closely with the regulators, and for the new cabinet, I'd like to pursue more about the cargo delivery and make sure that we can comply to all the standards that's required.
All right, we're looking forward to hearing about this in the future, how Malaysia is going to play a role in advancing drone tech within the region. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. SHIAN. Thank you, AMSYAR, for being here as well. It's been a privilege talking to both of you. I'm sure you're going to do great things in the coming years when it comes to drone tech. We're looking forward to that.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on that note, guys, we're going to take a quick breather, and when we come back, we're going to dissect the cabinet. We're going to take a look at some of the hits, and are there any misses? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Talk to Terrence. romantic song to lead into this topic, bro. I was thinking more like a rock tune, you know, because that's how this cabinet sounds to me. It's all rocked up. We don't know what to expect. We didn't know. We had some inkling and we had a wish list, but it seems like our Prime Minister has taken that wish list and done a number on it. It's almost unrecognizable. But we have got a cabinet nevertheless, a cabinet that describes exactly what this government is all about. It's going to be working in harmony with two parties that were never at ease with each other to begin with. So now they're together in government, and it's solidified through this cabinet, which has 7 members from UMNO in it. We have 4 members of DAP, and the other component parties make up the rest. So the two major warring factions, UMNO and DAP, sitting together in the same cabinet for the very first time. So joining me to help dissect this cabinet, we have HALMIE AZRIE, Research Executive for Democracy and Governance Unit with IDEAS. Welcome. Thank you, IDEAS, for continually coming on the program. We had Dr. Tricia the last time. And we have AKHRAMSYAH Sanusi, who's an ESG consultant. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you're going to be doing the G part today, right?
Yeah, well, and maybe touch a bit on the other two as well.
The other two as well. All right, so where do we start? Let's start right at the top, the Deputy Prime Minister post. So it was promised that we would have for the very first time a representative from Borneo to kind of make up that position of Deputy Prime Minister. So what was unexpected was, or maybe expected, I'm not sure, depending on who you talk to, was Dato' Sri Zahid Hamidi as Deputy Prime Minister once again. Your thoughts, AKHRAMSYAH?
Well, to me, I think there was a necessity for stability, right?
Right.
That's the easiest read out of it. Of course, people are disappointed for other reasons. But I think where we're coming from is, and where we can see the logic, is that we've had enough instability, and we're going into an economic crisis that will actually escalate over the next couple of years. That's the expectation. So, as a Prime Minister, and Dato' Sri Anwar has always had a bit of a reputation for pragmatism when it comes to politics. So, to some extent, we were not too surprised that he had to take this decision. Some would say it's a courageous decision. Actually, I think it's a bit of an opposite. It's actually
a safe decision.
Look at it in terms of the perspective of getting the government stable, and the bigger picture as to the need for stability for you to achieve something. Now, if you look at the turmoil over the last 3 years after the fall of the Pakatan Harapan government, the problem that was overwhelming the Prime Ministers then was the need to try and get things stable. It was so overbearing that the manifesto of both Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional had the word stable in it. Yeah, so why? You should have actually been taking for granted the notion of stable. And the thing with Pakatan Harapan, when they went into the elections, they didn't carry that word necessarily, but they tried to project that as well by declaring that they've got, first we've got 90 seats we're going to win, and now we're going to win more than 100 seats. That's trying to reassure people that they will deliver a stable government, but in an indirect way. I suppose a more subtle and a more elegant way. But nevertheless, I think where they're coming from is, let's try and get a government that is not going to rock, as you say, so that it doesn't rock, so that we can actually get down to the stuff that needs to be done. Right?
Okay.
So I suppose that's going to be my first salvo in terms of the logic, as you asked.
Okay. Well, Hamid, when we look at that logic, right, it is true that Dato' Sri Zahid Hamidi is the president of Barisan Nasional at this point in time, but not too far down the line, our party polls. What if? I mean, this is a what-if scenario. Dato' Sri Zahid is no longer president after the party polls. Will that change the position that he has as DPM?
Yeah, for sure. I think I echo what Akram was mentioning. And when you talk about the position of his court cases, pending court cases, of course, it's innocent until proven guilty, for sure. But still, it will definitely impede on his ability to conduct himself as a minister, as a Deputy Prime Minister, and the portfolio that he holds, which is rural and federal, right? So if, let's say, he succumbs to a defeat somewhere in the party elections, and then also in terms of the court cases. Definitely, public perception is not with him. Definitely, there needs to be a rethink or a reshuffle in the cards for the Prime Minister to actually think about that. Yeah, for sure.
While we're on the Deputy Prime Minister position, while all these issues do plague Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi, doesn't this give the opportunity to Datuk Sri Fazila Yusof to kind of shine? Because he's been the Works Minister before, he's been the Senior Minister before, but he hasn't actually come into a position of leadership on a national level per se. Your thoughts, AKHRAMSYAH?
Well, actually, the Sarawak context has always been a bit different. In fact, there's even a difference between the Sarawak and Sabah context. So, as a Sarawakian politician, ironically, usually a cabinet position, even the most senior cabinet position, is a grooming position leading up to them returning to Sarawak and actually then participating at the highest levels of the state government. Sure, he probably will be able to take this opportunity to shine. Nevertheless, I think the priority of the East Malaysian states at the moment is to seeing that if they can achieve a 2/3 majority with the win in Panas-Rai, this coalition, whether or not they can actually add to reinforcing MA63 and actually properly implementing all the aspirations that they have. Now, there will be differences of opinion as to where they will lead for the country, because even at the establishment of Malaysia, Malaysia is defined as a federation of Peninsular Sabah and Sarawak, which means that Sabah and Sarawak are equal partners to the whole of the peninsula. That as a straight definition in the current context and also in the memory of people with what is the steady state, very different, than can be the aspiration of the people of the two states. And it might be actually going to be a future question in terms of governance, because it's very different from other federations. So I think that Sri Fadilah probably has that challenge closer to his heart as a Sarawakian. But I think when it comes to how the politicians of Sabah Sarawak can contribute to the federal situation as a whole, that will be quite interesting as well. I mean, as an ESG consultant, I am a big fan of what Sarawak has done on the ESG space. Everything from the study and research on peatland, the work that they've actually done in terms of socializing the issue of climate change with the Rainforest Music Festival. This indicates that they were at least 20 years ahead of the rest of the country in seeing climate change as a serious matter for the nation. So if he is going to play a bigger role as someone representing that state and also the politicians and the governance of that state, that's my hope.
All right, now we have 3 more ministers up on screen right now, and the World Cup's in the background. I don't know why the World Cup's in the background. But anyway, when we look at the economy of Malaysia as it goes into these turbulent times, Rafizi seems to be the man for the job, handling the economy, and I'm sure he's going to work very closely with Datuk Sri Anwar, who is also going to be Finance Minister. What do you think of this? The Prime Minister holding the Finance Minister's portfolio. Yeah. Isn't that too much power concentrated in one person?
For sure, I agree with that, Terrence. Sorry, coming back to another point that I forgot to mention about Zahid. As TPM, the issue would be that because he also brought UMNO to one of its worst defeats in this current election. So that will also play into how he would definitely not get in support from his own party. That's one. Coming back to the question on what we call this, on the economy, right? I think there are 5 key portfolios that work together simultaneously, one hand in hand. The Finance Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, for good governance. You talk about Rafizi in terms of getting back the economy, restructuring and bringing employment. Also in terms of koperasi, the SMEs will definitely be under E1. And then we also have another 2, which is Tengku Zafrul for MITI, and also to gain a sense of reducing cost of living, Saluran Ayub. So these 5 key ministries will have to work together. Concentration of power is definitely something of concern. As we go back to what happened during the 1MDB scandal, it was the Prime Minister and the portfolio of Minister of Finance hand in hand. So I think that's another issue. I think it comes back to compromise. It was compromise that had to be done on Anwar's part. Otherwise, it would have gone to the other parties, right? So he had to consolidate that under his. And he also, there's another positive angle that you look at it, is that he rejected the salary, a lot of the benefits as a Prime Minister. So he's focused on the job in trying to ensure that his whole cabinet is clean. However, it is a concern on concentration of power because there is no oversight being done. That's why it is important for the opposition to have that shadow cabinet portfolio, to also have a very strong parliament select committee and all that. So there are ways to overcome. However, if it is possible, actually he should have given it to another person. Yeah.
Right, I agree. I mean, the opposition has to first of all show up to Parliament in the first place. Their track record of attendance is dismal.
Yeah,
so I hope they can improve on that. If they're going to form this shadow cabinet, they got to come there and, you know, be part of the debates, not chalk it up online and TikTok videos and things of that sort. So there's a new portfolio created for cost of living, which is very interesting. And for the very first time, we've had this portfolio being created. But before we get into that, Tengku Zafrul is seen as a rather controversial figure right about now because he lost in the elections. He lost, of course, to Dr. Zul, who's a very popular candidate in Kuala Selangor. However, he has been recruited to be part of the International Trade and Industry Ministry, helming the ministry for the very first time. Why do you think this is so, AMSYAR?
Well, I think people will start speculating ad nauseum about how it is that he managed to pull this off politically. Not to put too fine a word for it, there was some talk about how the delay for the announcement wasn't really because of the logistics of Dr. Anwar coming back, but really because of people lobbying at the last minute. So there will be people wondering as to whether that was him and whether the individuals involved were really the most senior of individuals. So let's put it that way. So that was speculation. I think he will never be able to escape. But there is a benefit to him being there. And it's, I think, ironic that he's actually going into MITI. Because he is actually, he will be a point of continuity in terms of the direction of the economy from the previous administration, for good or for bad. And being in MITI, he will have to face the storm that's actually coming their way around the CPTPP. So the CPTPP was basically, a trade agreement that was rushed through in the final week before the previous government was dissolved.
Correct. And just to have something to shout about.
Correct. And really, it is extremely irresponsible. And the irony was that, another irony was that the same minister that declared the CPTPP, that was Yasmin, was pushing it in the end, was the one who blocked it when he was actually the minister in the previous government. And suddenly he did it. So it was really, really obvious. It was to shore up the position of Dato' Sri Ismail Sabri at the time. Now suddenly, Dato' Ismail Sabri's, finance minister has to hold that portfolio and has to have an influence on the decision around CPTPP, of which everyone is screaming about. Morally incorrect because it was rushed through, not for the right reasons, not going to be beneficial for the country at all, opens the country to attacks from other countries and all this. So the whole emotion around sovereign rights, whether the SMEs are going to be destroyed by giant companies coming in, all this, Tengku Zafrul will have to actually face as the person who's supposed to champion trade.
Right.
So I'm actually, I don't know, I mean, in a way, I'm actually going to enjoy that.
Well, I wonder why he would put himself in that position, but I guess we'll find out. We'll find out. We're going to be looking at education shortly because it's quite interesting to see what happened there. We're going to take a short break, I understand, and when we come back, we're going to look into education, which is, I believe, one of the most important portfolios of all. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on To Terrence. Something new on the show because we were just talking about the economic side of the cabinet and now we're moving into the education part of the portfolios. Some shocks there. My two guests also, I think you're with me. You did not see this coming, right? But this is the individual who defeated one of Anwar's most hated enemies, I believe. So I do believe that this is a reward, whether or not we want to see it that way. Education Minister is Fadlina Siddiq. What are her educational credentials, though?
Born in Nibong Tebal.
Nibong Tebal.
Yeah,
Nibong
Nibong
Tebal.
Tebal, yeah. And I think it was against... I'm not sure, but basically she won, yeah, Nibong Tebal. And
check.
her credential, I think she's from she's from the law, from the law background, as well as she's been involved with education for a very extended period of time in terms of her father, the family, and also in terms of the interactions that she has done. Nevertheless, I think it is a surprise, not only her, another appointment, I think, as first-term MPs given the portfolio of education and also health, Dr. Zaliha. I think these two, although they are female, it is encouraged, but they are first-term MPs and they are given such big portfolio. So that's a very big challenge. And coming back to the issue of senatorship, I think just to touch a bit on it, out of the 4 senators, 3 of them lost the election.
Right.
So Dr. Zamri, we also have Zamri Kadi is foreign. We also have Tengku Zafrul, MITI, and we also have Saifuddin Nasution. All 3 of them lost. So again, people will not be happy with the lineup of the cabinet. And in terms of the first-term MPs, education is a very big thing.
Absolutely.
But I think it comes back into partnership with Khalid Nordin, who has been in the previous administration as higher education minister. So I think there should be a discussion there. And yeah, I think that it's a big challenge for whoever takes up the education portfolio.
I may have got my wires crossed on that earlier assessment, but it is true that we do have some interesting individuals in the lineup. But whatever happened to Dr. Mazli? I mean, I thought everyone was gunning for him to take over and kind of bring back his reformist ideas in education.
Okay, I'm coming from a backdrop of actually having Mazli as not just my former minister, but also a friend. There is, you have to acknowledge that Dr. Mazli, while his heart is in the right place, and whilst he did actually manage to make some changes and through quite radical ideas as well, he was though administratively struggling, and I think that is part of the reason why, in a way, we're blessed that we're not going to go down that route again. We don't know whether or not we're going to go through that route again with this Fadlina, but at least a fresh pair of eyes, and also I think she's PKR's women's chief.
Yep.
So following the old logic, where when you get seniority at a party of that level, you need to at least have the capacity to administer and organize that part of an organization. It's not perfect in governance terms. Actually, it doesn't translate necessarily too well. But at least in terms of managing people and actually leading, she's not going to come in cold the way that Mazli did. And in the case of Fadlina, one of the hopes that I have being that she's being new, fresh, and not really being beholden. Remember that Dr. Mazli was actually part of the fabric of the education system even before. Having Dr. Fadlina coming in, we're hopeful of really radical reform. So, I mean, one of the ideas that we've always had was that our kids are finishing the O-levels or the O-level equivalent, meaning SPM, too soon. Too late. Too late. We should have all our kids finishing SPM at the age of 15. And then the logic goes like this. If you finish at 15, that means that you start doing employable training after that. So that by the time you're hitting 17 and 18, you have done either your TVET training, you're halfway through your degree, or you've completed your diploma. So people can actually be bookkeepers by the age of 18. People can actually be welders by the age of 18. So instead of having everyone running around being Grab drivers or Food Panda bikers at 18, you have a whole set of skills that with people coming out at the age of 18.
That's right.
And this is a sort of radical reform we should push. And in fact, one of my biggest disappointments of another friend, Dr. Radhi Jidin, was that he didn't take advantage of what happened with the PKP and MCO to radically change it. I mean, the calendar was a mess anyway.
Right.
And what did you do when you came back? You decided to try and now bring the calendar back to the old calendar. That's extremely disappointing.
I think it was disappointing for teachers and teachers' spouses, speaking as one. It was a mess for the teachers, and it was even worse because they took out their frustrations on the entire family sometimes, because they had to work into the late hours to complete work that was not even theirs to begin with. So they had inherited a bunch of chaotic situations. I don't know how the current education minister is going to solve that, but you know, the ball is in your court now, and we hope for radical reforms. So now let's wrap things up. Wow, we've come to the end. I had so many other cabinet ministers that would love to go through, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. So let's talk about where you see this cabinet heading in the next 5 years. Do you see this cabinet staying on the same page, working as a team and moving forward, or do you see cracks forming?
For me, it will definitely rely heavily upon the leadership of the Prime Minister, how he would actually ensure everyone toes the line, everyone comes to the same page, and it also depends on how the pressure that comes from external parties, which is like the opposition, what types of rhetorics they are using. So definitely that's how the team works. It will need to defend itself. And nevertheless, I think in terms of the competency of the whole team, it's a very young, it's a very PKR-centric for sure. Nevertheless, I think there's a good balanced mix amongst the ministers. Again, flaws everywhere, but moving forward, it's a very lean cabinet.
It is a very lean cabinet. With the deputy minister inclusion, I think it'll be about 50 people. Unfortunately, I'm sure we don't have enough time to ask you for a last word. I think you've said your piece. Thank you very much to all our viewers for watching us. We're going to be talking about this cabinet for many, many, many weeks to come, I believe, as each of the ministers have their chance to come on board any one of our programs and talk to us about the direction they're choosing for the country moving forward. On that note, thank you for joining me on Talk to Terrence. It's been a pleasure speaking to you guys live. We're going to go off the air. Jazz has picked a very special song to encapsulate the entire feel of the nation around the cabinet. Thank you for watching. I'm Terrence. This has been Talk to Terrence. Take it away, Jazz.
It starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind. I designed this rhyme to explain in due time. All I know, time is a valuable thing. Watch it fly by as the pendulum swings. Watch it count down to the end of the day. The clock sticks life away. It's so unreal. Didn't look out below. Watch your time go right out the window. Trying to hold on. They didn't even know we wasted it all. Just watch you go. You kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. One thing, I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind. I designed this rhyme to remind myself how I tried. So, in spite of the way you were mocking me, acting like I was part of your property, remembering all the times you fought with me, I'm surprised they got so. Things aren't the way they were before. You wouldn't even recognize me anymore. Not that you knew me back then, but it all comes back to the end. The end, you kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried.